This is not a review. This is an essay dedicated to exploring the genius behind Gareth Edwards' underrated masterpiece, The Creator, discussing its deeper topics, and breaking down the message told by the very existence of this film in wider context. So relax, get comfortable. This video does not require eyes, just your ears and your brain. The Creator is the beginning of what I call next-gen cinema, NGC for short. This is the evolution of the sci-fi genre, just as the Barbie movie is the evolution of comedy, self-aware cinema. I believe we will be seeing more movies that are an evolution of their respective genres in the near future, and as we do, we will look back as 2023 is the year that propelled this type of storytelling forwards, and we will look at The Creator as a catalyst for the movement of NGC. So you probably have two questions now. 1. What exactly defines NGC? 2. What is so special about The Creator that makes it NGC? So, to answer the first question, I would argue the pound one most prominent feature of NGC is innovation on the genre, its cliches, tropes and stereotypes, its storytelling structure, and all other features such as music, CGI, SFX and script. Another feature would be originality, but the most interesting feature of NGC is the connection and understanding between the creators of the film and the audience. Haha, creators, get it. What I mean by this point is that unlike older Hollywood movies, we as the audience now have the power to influence the development of cinema, because cinema now requires our attention over other entertainment in order to be financially profitable, giving us some leverage in the decisions for what movies should be made and which movies will succeed in the global box office. This can be seen in a positive or negative light, as you could definitely argue both ways. The Marvel Universe is a prime example of what can happen if a studio's priority becomes pumping its audience with ultra-generic media for profit, becoming symbiotically and interdependently connected to its audience in a plea for attention in return for low-quality entertainment. You can see how the audience effect has negatively affected everyone's experience within the Marvel franchise. Viewers are not receiving the quality content they signed up for. It's are being milked for profit with multiple movies and TV shows, and the crew working on these films are being mistreated, as seen with current strikes for writers and VFX artists. So to summarize, NGC can be defined as creative and innovative film or TV that have developed an interdependent bond with their audience, leading to the creation of more genuine and relatable media that is both original and new, breaking stereotypes in many aspects, whilst also sticking to core principles of their genre. This definition explains why I think NGC is an evolution of cinema. It builds on the concepts that have been proven to work, just like the theory of natural selection. I love this idea because, like we see in The Creator, NGC respects its genre's history, rather than rejecting it for something new. Now that we can define next-gen cinema, we can address the second question, and the topic of this video: what makes The Creator so special that it falls into the category of NGC? Well, essentially everything, but I've categorized it into these two components, script and visuals. Let's discuss each one. The script of The Creator stood out to me in multiple ways. The most obvious is the use of chapter title cards, which are not often seen in the sci-fi genre. The cards in this film follow a beautiful style of English in an Asian language that I don't want to assume the name of. The bold one-word titles are great because they are easy to remember, especially when the topic mentioned in the title is explored within the chapter. Every chapter is set in a different location, with a new plotline, making the chapters very separate and memorable. At first I thought the title cards in this movie were unnecessary, but as I began developing this theory of NGC, I realized this design choice actually makes perfect sense. Just by using this unique storytelling technique, Gareth Edwards has subconsciously linked this sci-fi action film to other completely different films that use title cards, such as many of Quentin Tarantino and Wes Anderson's movies. Script writing like this builds on traditional sci-fi storytelling, whilst incorporating completely different styles never seen before within this genre, contributing to the NGC status that this film has earned. After a brief intro sequence, which was beautifully crafted and edited in its own right, we cut to Joshua and learn more about him as the scene progresses. However, it is not Joshua who is the main character here, it's the Nomad. It is introduced before our protagonist. Its sheer scale and eerie horror is what captures us. We aren't completely sure what it does, but the holographic blue target sweeping over the terrain gives us a clue. Within 10 minutes of the film we have witnessed a war crime drop from space. The writing behind this scene is layered flawlessly in a way that it both sets up multiple plot lines and introduces mechanics of the world. This is done masterfully throughout the movie. As I said, the Nomad is the main character here. Nomad is a villain with an intriguing archetype. It acts as a lurker that follows the protagonist throughout the story, and is unstoppable until the protagonist completes their character arc, at which point a final battle commences. These villain types show up at pivotal moments along the journey, and this is exactly how Nomad presents itself. Does this sound familiar? The same archetype was used in last year's Puss in Boots: The Last Wish with the character of the wolf. I think this hunting type villain is an interesting way to spice up a generic adventure story, especially as it can easily be put in the backseat whilst other antagonists are on screen, creating a layered plotline with interweaving antagonists, building on the traditional hero's journey. Therefore it only makes sense that we see it used here. In an NGC movie, which we described as evolving on older methods, which includes storytelling devices, this scene alone separates the movie as NGC, because Edwards, the director, has not only proven a capability for evolutionary storytelling, but also evolutionary visuals. The color palette of natural moonlight, a dark ocean, emissive holographic rays from Nomad, and the strong orange glow of the beach house is balanced perfectly and saturated in a way that we have never seen before on the big screen. This is a result of Edwards' unique filming and post-production pipeline, which I will not be discussing here because many other videos out there already explain it better and in more depth than I could express here. The eye in this scene are gorgeous to look at. Once again Edwards has built on the library of knowledge of sci-fi robots and evolved it to the next level of immersion. The movements of the eye is human-like and natural, yet is jittery and hard-surfaced at the same time. This is done through sound. If you look closely the eyes are truly moving naturally, but the SFX of hydraulics, pistons and machinery as they move and rotate, tricks our brains into interpolating the movement as robotic. This is a genius technique that I'm surprised is not being talked about more, as I believe the combination of VFX and SFX used with the eye in this movie will be the basis for all future representation of human-like robots in film, until of course we don't need VFX to have robots in our scenes. Let's continue following the story. The attack on the lab really shows us how unique this world is. We as an audience have never seen such an interpretation of an eye war, where the new Asian Republic defensively embraces AI, whilst the Western world actively hunts it, developing weapons of mass destruction action like the Nomad and other weapons seen in the film. The script is very clever in how it compares these future events to historical events, like the Cold War and 9/11, subconsciously presenting AI as terrorists, whilst the USA propagated themselves as heroes. We see the type of propaganda present in the future just as it was in the past. For example, the US forces are taught that killing AI is simply just turning them off, as they are not real. Dehumanizing the opposition is a genuine war strategy. The Black Mirror episode, Men Against Fire, discusses this topic of dehumanization, showing how seeing the enemy as monsters makes it easier to kill them. All this background history once again shows how Edwards is building on the concept of projecting true history and politics within sci-fi to make a more realistic and believable story. I've even heard some people go as far as describing this film as a documentary of the future, rather than fiction. This realism is another aspect of The Creator. Being in GC, it may not be the first sci-fi to incorporate politics, but it innovates on that idea by specifically being believable through the technological and ideological conflicts between Asia and the Western world. I also have to mention the visuals in this scene. The high contrast of the sky, both at night and day, and the tall green crop fields, is outstanding. The crisp image, the reflections and light refractions, and the color reminded me of the cornfield scenes in Christopher Nolan's Interstellar, which makes so much sense, knowing that both films pride themselves on using real locations. Any hardcore Nolan fan will pounce on the chance to tell you how Nolan grew the iconic cornfield just for the movie, then sold the crops to make back revenue to help pay for the film's development. This is the kind of innovation that not only leads to NGC, not only looks better and is a larger spectacle than VFX, but can actually be more financially viable or cost-effective for the film and crew. As Dan Morrell said in his review of The Creator, it puts these big-budget movies to shame, and I couldn't agree more. Skipping forwards a couple chapters, we get to what is my favorite sequence from the entire film. That is when the US cavalry arrives at the temple and war commences. Within this sequence, there are so many unique and jaw-droppingly beautiful moments, and I'm sure if you love this movie as much as I did, you are desperate to discuss these scenes with anyone who mentions this movie. When the war tanks first arrive, you can see some monks gather around to greet the newcomers, not realizing they are in danger, and they are slaughtered instantly. This is an example of the level of detail and love put into this film that is not usually present in big-budget emotionally detached sci-fi films. The monk eyes were not built for war, and are therefore completely useless and genuinely terrified throughout the sequence. It is at this point in the movie, when we know that the eyes never really dropped the nuke on Los Angeles, that we begin to see the emotional and caring side of the robots. They are seen carrying children to safety, praying and even sacrificing their lives for the humans and simulants. This is another genius directing choice that brings to light the big themes of the film. What is consciousness? Are the feelings of robots real? We see the blue holographic lights again, this time being used by smaller weaponry, but with the added terror of tracking ability, the pure horror of watching the targets track boats, and then people, ups, the realism of the war at hand, the effort put into world building, suggesting that the US Army uses this technology throughout their military, once again gives the movie the immersion of a heavy fantasy story like Lord of the Rings, whilst maintaining the futuristic sci-fi of Star Wars, and 2001 Space Odyssey. And now we come to the scene stealer, the kamikaze robots running across the bridge. This 5-minute sequence might be one of the best in cinematic history. Every aspect of the scene was thought out, and presented in a way that no dialogue is needed to understand the horror at hand. The design of the robot, barrel-looking, clunky, rusty, wide arms and wingspan, tall legs, the monotone beeping ramping up as it runs across the bridge and detonates. Just when you thought the horror was over, they send a second one, at which point Alfie walks in and the plot continues. If you asked me for one scene that could put this movie in the category of NGC, I would give you this one. Every aspect of it is perfected through the audience effect. Just as with the Nomad, Edwards has shown he knows exactly what the audience wants to see in these scenes. Unlike the generic, predictable, large-scale, mid-movie battles in many sci-fi and action-adventure movies, the kamikaze robots are unexpected, and a truthfully gruesome result of war. The audience is connected to this scene. There are no giant airships being lasered out of the sky. There are no giant armies rushing towards each other. There are no predictable boss battles, because NGC has evolved past that. It is aware that the audience does not connect to it, nor does the script benefit from this generic storytelling. The result is an intimate scene, within this existential context, that takes its time to let the horror settle in, through genius scriptwriting and visuals. This is why The Creator is NGC. This is why I think that regardless of the critical and financial acclaim of this film currently, as more NGC rolls out, audiences and critics will look back at The Creator, in hindsight, and appreciate it for its daring experimentation on sci-fi storytelling and visuals, and it will become a classic in the history of NGC. Thanks for listening to my thoughts on The Creator. I hope you had a delicious meal, or a relaxing break off work, or a peaceful and thoughtful quarter of an hour to yourself. Whatever you were doing, I hope this video multiplied your enjoyment of it. Have a great rest of your day, or a good night. I would genuinely appreciate if you decide to like and subscribe to this channel, as it will inspire me to make more essays, and share my thoughts online. See you next time.